After looking at trends in shell construction, with a clear-headed understanding of the expense and waste required to produce concrete shells as well as metal shells, we might ask, why brick? And as soon as we ask, we sort of know the answers, right? The Uruguayan architect Eladio Dieste developed a system of incredible brick vaults, the images of which just floor me. They're made of self-supporting brick. In doing so, he brought the cutting edge of modern design, shell design, into conversation with a material that was not only part of a long tradition in the architecture of Uruguay, but it was also a material of the everyday people of the same country. Brick was in fact a part of their vernacular, which is another way of saying their regional design language. Take a minute looking at this structure. This is one of the facades of the Cristo Obrero Church in Atlantida in Uruguay. Dieste's structures fuse architectural elegance with structural integrity. By this we mean that the materials you see are the very same materials that are doing the work to hold the building in place. Unlike concrete shells that required extensive lumber and formwork, brick structures, brick vaults, are able to hold themselves. Often architects will use structural materials in a traditional post and lintel construction and then hang a crazy modern skin or exterior sheathing onto the building's visible surfaces. We see this in the work of, say, the architect Frank Gehry. You might be familiar with his work at the Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles. It's this wild structure. He comes up with the idea for these by crumpling paper and then finding the crumples he likes the best and making a building that looks like that. But to do it, he still uses, you see the wood construction going up, it's classic post and lintel. He's not pushing engineering and architecture as far as they can go. He's using something really traditional and doing something fun, undoubtedly over the top. But when they do this, when they effectively put a flashy modern makeup over an age-old mode of design, they're in a way shortcutting what architecture can do. And Dieste rejected the idea that a building's skin, that surface, could be just a surface. Instead, he sought to create buildings whose skin and structure are intimately integrated. His end results are some of architecture's most innovative engineering feats of the 20th century. Look carefully at this image. What do you see? What is this? What's happening here? And what does this type of vaulting enable? It's unclear from the image because we don't have a lot of context, but we're looking at the ceiling of an industrial building that showcases one of showcases one of Dieste's most astounding developments, which is the Gaussian vault. So beginning with a deep understanding of the structural forces inherent in traditional vault design, Dieste studied the physics of a series of alternative shapes and vaulted structures. He studied the behavior of planes when they're built or when they're curved, and he used these studies to create vaults of elaborate and structural beauty that hadn't been seen in the world before. Dieste looked to dome construction from the ancient Middle East. He looked to ancient Roman arches, as well as their vaults and archivolts, to study their properties. And what we see here are some of the most famous results of his studies. It doesn't seem that complex, but let's see exactly how these work. Before we move to the next slide, find a piece of paper, just a standard piece of paper, one that's not creased or bent in any way. Pause the video, find that, and then come back. All right, so you can see what we're up to in the diagram shown here. So take a plain sheet of unfolded paper in your hand, like the person in figure A. If you try to get the paper to stand out straight from your hand without introducing a curve, a new curve of any kind, there will be a curve where it falls, of course, from your fingers down. But if you don't introduce any new curves, that paper is just gonna flop. Try it out. You've done it a million times, but let's just really get into this. Okay, but now look at B. You've also probably done this a million times. By simply adding downward pressure from your thumb, as shown by the second hand, you suddenly have the beginning of a Gaussian curve, one that brings more rigidity and architectural potential to that same single piece of paper that just flopped without the introduction of a well-placed indentation or curve. Now you can see what's happening. Using careful engineering, mathematics, physics, computations, Dieste was able to use single planes of materials to achieve what hadn't been achieved before, simply by understanding the properties of planes and the properties of arches and vaults. Now with another unfolded piece of paper. Go ahead and get one. Pause this and get one if you need it. You can try out another of Dieste's discoveries. Try to stand a piece of paper on its edge. When you do that, of course, right, it's just going to fall over. It's going to fall flat on the table. Now, if you take your fingers on the top of it and create these undulating curves, the paper will begin to have more structural rigidity. Without the addition of piers, beams, or any other structural changes, your single plane of paper now has heightened engineering properties, gained through geometrical changes alone. These are the techniques that Dieste mastered, and he mastered them with the vernacular material of bricks. Dieste's discoveries didn't emerge from a vacuum. Here we are looking into his home. You can see just a traditional vaulted ceiling, one that the Romans might have come up with here in our view. But also in our view is a small painting. Let's see it from a different angle. Here we're looking at that stunning vault again. And the way, just like in those factories, that those vaults, that curvature at the height of the ceiling allows for windows, allows for more natural lighting to come in. So on the wall behind Dieste's couch here is the key to a larger movement that merged art, architecture, and geopolitics. We find it in the framed work by the most famous Uruguayan artist to date, Joaquin Torres Garcia, one of the forerunners of the Uruguayan avant-garde. We haven't discussed the avant-garde. Literally, it's a military term that means the front guard. But it's been moved into the sphere of art to mean those people who are charging at the front line, coming up with innovations, pushing our idea of what art is. Torres Garcia was certainly one such person. He was an avant-garde painter, sculptor, muralist, novelist, writer, teacher, theorist, a real polymath. And he targeted age-old conflicts between ancient and modern. Classicism versus innovation. Reason versus emotion. Figuration versus abstraction. And instead of trying to wrestle out which was better, as so many philosophers and theorists have done over time, he simply said there's no contradiction between any of these. In other words, it's within the power of art and the artist to reconcile these age-old arguments. We don't have time to get into this, but he is a fascinating figure to study. What we will dive into is his manifesto. We see it here. It's the manifesto of the School of the South. In February of 1935, the Uruguayan artist and theorist Torres Garcia published his first Latin American essay manifesto titled La Escuela del Sur, or the Sur of the South. Torres Garcia, who had just returned to Uruguay from Europe after 43 years of absence, began his manifesto, his big, bold statement about the world, by stating this: "Our north is the south. There should be no north for us except in opposition to our south. So let us turn the map upside down and voila, that is our real position, not how the rest of the world sees it." What's he saying? Let's look a little further. From now on, the elongated tip of South America will point insistently at the south, our north. Our compass as well, it will incline irremediably and forever towards the south, towards our own pole. When ships sail from here traveling north, they will be traveling down, not up as before, because the north is now below. And as we face our south, the east is to our left. This is a necessary rectification so that we now know who we are. All right, obviously, this artist is not changing the polar north or polar south of the globe. What's he trying to do? Take a few minutes and write this down. This map was published for the first time in May of 1936 in a publication called The Circle and the Square. Torres Garcia is one of Latin America's most protagonistic artists. What he was trying to do is flip the way that the people of the South saw themselves. No longer as at the bottom, no longer as below or beneath. But he was trying to give the artists, the people of Uruguay, a sense of their own identity, a general consciousness of the importance of their own culture, rather than looking north to the United States, looking north to what Europe was doing. He was trying to flip the switch and instead say, let's look south. Let's look to who we are, who we've been, and who our people embody. Don't worry, we're getting back to bricks. This is the artwork of Torres Garcia. And you can see here that gridded structure is being used to scale things. If we looked carefully, and we won't take all that time, what he's putting into relationship with one another are fundamental concepts. The sun, fish in the sea, the importance of the face, the relationship between humans and animals, between technology and tradition. All the things that he was trying to reconcile in his art, he is playing out right here in this gridded structure. For Torres Garcia, this grid, this tight-knit piling of stone on stone, of rectilinear form on top of rectilinear form, was part of the tradition of Uruguay. It was part of the tradition of the southern part of the Americas. He was drawing on ancient Incan traditions of stonework, which we see here. If you take my Latin American course, we'll go into this in detail. And this idea of the gridded structure of all that is, or using the grid as a way to hang things together that are often in conflict, was a strong influence on our architect, Eladio Dieste. So looking at Dieste's work now, through the lens of the work of Torres Garcia, putting Dieste in conversation with the other artists, the other avant-garde thinkers, makers, and doers of his time, we can begin to see the broader context for the incredible work that Dieste was doing. I'm going to pause this video. I'm actually going to stop it. And you'll watch a brief video that shows you in more detail the interior of this incredible work of architecture. Now, it's going to be in Spanish. I'm not expecting you to understand what's being said. If you speak Spanish, fabulous. But I really just want you to see the work, have an understanding of how the components come together, what the brick is doing. All right, enjoy.